still surprised to hear what's coming their way of these new mandates. So as you all know, it was the election went the Democrats' way, and it was a DFL trifecta. So the first time in I don't know how many decades we had that. I had actually still hopes for the session because they had a really large historic budget surplus of $17.5 billion. So I work on tax issues, so I thought, wow, they're not going to be able to raise taxes, right, with that big of surplus. I was very wrong, right? So they had this historic surplus, and we still saw tax increases of over $9 billion that will be impacting a lot of business owners, unfortunately, over the next 4 years. And they also had a historic increase in spending of over about 35% increase in spending as well, which we feel is the question on the sustainability of doing that. So because we're already a high tax state, we hear from our business community of their concerns regarding Minnesota's taxes and regulation that's really impeding their ability to invest and grow in the state. So we would really have been focused on, can we reduce taxes? If you look around the nation, what we've seen is a lot of states have also had surpluses. They use those surpluses to reduce their tax burdens because they realize high tax burdens can undermine investment in your state, talent recruitment and retention, and ultimately economic growth. And so a lot of states, over about 27 states, have actually reduced their taxes over the last 3 years. A lot of them reduced their individual income tax. About 13 of them also reduced their corporate tax. Minnesota, unfortunately, will now have the top corporate rate in the nation at 9.8%, starting in 2024, because even states that were more blue states like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, actually had higher taxes than Minnesota for the corporate, and they have rolled back some of those taxes. So Minnesota will be, unfortunately, #1 in the nation for our corporate tax. We're 6th highest in the nation for our individual income tax. And so we had hoped we would roll back some of those, and we didn't. Instead, we went the opposite, and we increased taxes. I think folks will probably talk about some of those tax increases. But a lot of what they did is they also added many new regulations on our business community, a lot on our employers in the state, so not just on our business community, but also on our public schools, local governments, nonprofits also have these new mandates. So with that, I will stop. There's a lot. You have our cost and compliance guide, so you can see a lot of the information there. And then also, hand it out. And then we also do every year we see how Minnesota compares on key business climate indicators as well as economic data. And you can take a look at this document as well. When I said that high taxes and regulation can undermine economic growth, you can look at this document to see, unfortunately, we're no longer nation leading on many key economic indicators. We've been lagging the nation. And so I think in this document it will show you that we're about 35th in the nation right now for GDP growth, and we have been lagging in that indicator for many years now. So we're seeing, I do think, some of that impacts of those high tax rates and regulations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauryn to talk about the new employer mandates.
Thanks, Beth. I'm Lauryn, Scholhorst, as mentioned, and I run our workplace management and workforce development policy. And as Beth mentioned, the business benchmarks, a lot of what we do is based on data. We are around the state in forums like this, hearing from all of you about what you'd like to see the state do to help grow and thrive. And when we go to the legislature to say our businesses feel overtaxed and overregulated already, it's because of documents like this where we compare around the state and know that we are competing against not just Minnesota businesses, but regionally and globally. So we really try to anchor our policy positions in data and real world experiences of our members. The cost and compliance guide, so I'm going to talk about mandates, and I think one of the easiest ways for you to visualize just how big of an anti-business, anti-employer session it was this year is to open the first page of this document and look at the when will new policies impact your business. So I could sit up here and talk for at least an hour just on this page alone, and in fact in some of the tours that we've done around the state, we've gotten stuck on my section because there are so many questions that folks have. But I think for the purposes of today is to really put in front of you all this information so you are aware that a lot of things passed that are already in effect, and a lot of businesses don't know if things are already in effect or are approaching effective dates for some major new policies in the state that surprisingly a lot of the business community doesn't even know about. And that has been one of the biggest surprises. We go around the state, this is probably the 16th or 17th stop this fall that we've done around the state to make sure our members are in compliance. And that, aside from fighting at the legislature, our role is the education piece. And we really want to make sure that you all have best practices and information at your fingertips so that you know when things are coming down the pipe. And so in the middle of session, we said, I think we're going to have a summer of webinars, which we did. If you visit the Minnesota Chamber website, you can see our toolkit with a lot of more of this built out for you to click on and have access to resources, as well as a timeline, because things were moving fast and furiously during session. And one thing, we fought to try to get effective dates pushed out at the very least. I would think you can talk about how surprising it might have been this session to fight for as much as we did just to change effective dates back to give businesses a few months extra to understand. So the scope of what was enacted this legislative session was sweeping in mandates. If you are a small business, so think not just 50 or under, or 21 and under, or 15 and under, but a business of any size, you will now be subjected to all of these laws. I think a lot of small businesses thought realistically there's going to be a small business exemption. There's enough federal laws and state laws already that really protected. Okay, 50 maybe, some people feel it's too big. 21, 15, we really thought that there might be some small business exemptions. Those were all removed this legislative session. So the full suite of new labor laws apply to you if you have one employee, as well as, okay, maybe my part-time employees or my temporary workers might be exempt, right? That's a workforce that didn't hit the buy-in thresholds or the number of hours. Those were also removed. So part-time and temporary workers are now covered by the full suite of labor laws that were enacted this legislative session. So it's really important to, if you see colleagues that aren't here who might have thought realistically that small business exemptions would maintain themselves, that's not the case. Another thing is effective dates, right? We're gonna have plenty of time to see this coming, and agencies will put out guidance and they'll reach out to us. Show of hands, has the Department of Labor and Industry reached out to your business to let you know that this is happening? Okay.
The only thing I'm aware of is the small business calls that they're doing.
Okay, great. So there's not that much education awareness going out by the state itself on the new laws that they have imposed. There is a website. Most of these agencies have a website specifically for some of these policies, but we're really taking it upon our shoulders and our partners' shoulders to kick this information out, because the last thing we want is for businesses to not be aware of it in compliance. So things not just relating to your size of your business, but the Human Rights Act was updated in a few places. So you have new things coming online with what you can and cannot ask during the hiring process, how broad and certain things are protected classes. So you need to be mindful for anti-discrimination purposes and things like that. Tools you might have used in your workforce management, like non-competes or franchise agreements, those have been prohibited. Not on any sort of a income scale or things like that, just you are no longer allowed to enter into a non-compete agreement for your workforce, for example. Those are some of the big policy changes. Who's heard of sick and safe time or paid family medical leave? Okay. Those are two very, very big new mandates. Minnesota is a state that joins not a couple handful of states that have these policies on the books. On January 1st, the state is imposing essentially Minneapolis, Duluth, and St. Paul's sick and safe time ordinances at the state level. And this is a policy that is guaranteed almost time off for your employees. There's two ways you can go about it. There's an accumulation methodology where for every 30 hours your employees work, they can earn up to 1 hour of sick and safe time. The thresholds are 48 hours in a year or 80 hours with a carryover. So anywhere between 48 and 80 hours guaranteed. Now I say guaranteed because it's for a very, very wide variety of qualifying conditions. It's not just communicable diseases. It's if dependent's school is closed because of weather, right? That would be a reason. Or if you're in the safe time is for sexual assault. So if you have to do court or file police reports and things like that. So it's broader than just a communicable disease. And there's very limited notice requirements, right? You can't assume almost that this is an eligible use for this leave unless 3 days have gone by, and then you can request a doctor's note. It's protected, so jobs can't be lost. There's no adverse employment, and the people that it applies to for family member is very, very broad. It's not just your spouse or your partner. It's not your dependent children. It's your parents, your nieces and nephews, your siblings, your in-laws, and your neighbors, right? It goes beyond that family affiliation. So in other words, if somebody is not showing up for work, you should presume that they are going to be using an eligible protected reason as your first default. So training frontline managers, modifying your attendance policies are going to be key. And then you have a few choices on how you want to administer this. But know that on January 1st, pay stubs and handbooks need to be updated with language saying, these are your rights, posters need to be posted, and then every pay stub, whatever your pay cycle is, you need to have the number of hours earned and used. I had mentioned in my early remarks about some changes, some fundamental changes that happened. You might think that, oh, well, like our workplace policy, there's some buy-in, right? They have to work 90 days or a certain amount of hours before this goes into effect. In the sick and safe law, you begin accumulating your hours on your first hour of employment. So it is an immediate benefit. Now, you won't be able to use an hour until roughly 30 hours, so that would be your 1 hour. But the point being is the process begins on day one. Paid family medical leave will kick in January 1st, 2026. So there's still some time. Lots of feedback for legislators to take about when you take a look at the policy, what might make it easier, better, changes to be made. But given the current legislative makeup, those who passed the laws are probably not going to change those same laws much in the next year. But there is some time to really dig into how this is going to work. And we hope that you can be a partner in that and share your advice or feedback with us. The other area that I didn't mention that is already in effect, legalization of recreational marijuana. That was something that went into effect over the summer, and it has impacts for when you can or cannot test, how you notice to your employees, your policies and things like that. I know a lot of folks with medical marijuana and other states have been dealing with this in their workforce. The change was mostly on the way that you share this information with your employees and make sure that your policies conform with the new law. So some people didn't feel a strong change in the new law. Other people had to do some significant rewriting. Hopefully you've already updated your paperwork. With a lot of these rules, if it's not in writing and distributed to your employees, you're vulnerable for any sort of a labor violation if you take adverse employment action. So my message is spend some intimate time with your handbooks, if you haven't already, before the end of the year to make sure that they are updated. The last thing I will mention that in addition to these broad sweeping policies, there were a number of industry-specific efforts that took place, and I expect that will continue. This past legislative session, refineries, warehouse distribution centers, nursing homes, healthcare facilities, those were the primary areas of focus. So they have new workplace standards, new workplace restrictions, new reporting requirements. Otherwise, I think in Minneapolis, for example, they're looking at this concept of labor standards boards, and will that be informative for the legislature next session? That kind of covers the big overview of these policies. Because a lot of them are in effect or shortly coming into effect, I hope it's not news to you, but if it is, please take a look at this guide and check on the website, and you can share further resources with the team here to have the FAQs present and the documents that you can post and share. There are a few resources that exist from the agency level that should be helpful. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions on any of these topics.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to go legislators or one of that probably went on